What does Empire 2 Total War mean to you? Does Empire 2 Total War mean a game where you get improved AI, a great representation of the 18th century, a huge variety of factions, redesigns to naval battles, to campaign map, and to many unit rebalancing as well? Also, a graphical uplift that would be needed. An Empire 2 Total War, I think, would be an absolutely excellent way to revive the historical franchise, and it is something that we need right now, but I'm interested to know what your opinion is. So at the end of this video, I want to know what your opinion is, and let's have that talk. Now, Empire 2 Total War to me means all of that. It means a redesign of what the 18th century should essentially be. And the battles need to be more than just XYZ. Battles can't have AI that is just randomly charging you. The battles can't have generals where they're just charging you randomly and that's it. And one of the main problems I think was Empire's sort of rushed launch had that issue where the AI was never finished because of some other issues or development or whatever you want to name it. So Empire Total War is a game that I think that mods have definitely saved it. I definitely think that even in vanilla it's quite playable, it's quite much more playable. But at the same time, I did feel that we were never really playing the full 18th century. That is, you're playing with a sort of a mini pike and shot type of era, and then basically you evolve from pikemen to musketeers, and then musketeers to line infantry or whatever you want to name it. Now the mod I'm using is Empire 2 Total War, and this starts right now, currently at night 1690. And Empire 2 Total War is what I want Empire, the official sequel, to be. Because you can obviously see that there are formations that you normally would not get within the old game. And you have different units, different formations. This is something that I think Empire Total War lacked, because it had a sort of a uniform basis for most of the battles right now. And I really want to see a reintroduction of naval combat. I think they did naval combat really well. There's individual animations for cannons, for loading, and as I zoom in here you can see that there are soldiers on the masts that are, firing pot shots at each other, and there's so much more here. I think the naval battle music by Richard Beddoe was absolutely excellent, and I think they did a fantastic job with the look of the naval ships, and I think they just did a really great job in introducing you to naval combat as well. But that's not to say, the fact is that Empire Total War I still think has the foundations of a good Total War game. Now you can see these Native American lancers charge at each other, but they are using European type of animations. But the main aspect was, I think this was a game that was so big that it would have been impossible to balance every single faction. Because this was like the first time that Creative Assembly was going so huge that they were covering the whole world. And of course, these factions are from the Warpath campaign, and I'm so glad that they made a Warpath campaign, even though the factions could have been better represented in my opinion. And of course, when I was playing as France and I had to go and fight the Iroquois Confederacy, it was not an easy job, because the Iroquois are literally one of the most powerful American tribes, and I think they did an absolutely excellent job in representing just how powerful the Iroquois really were. I think the North American campaign is a really great way to sort of introduce players into the 7 Years' War, into the 9 Years' War, into many areas, and I really do think that the campaign map of Europe could be more enlarged. Now it is odd that you are seeing Prussians sort of, going to British ports and blockading them, but this is the mod. There's great mods like Darth Mod and Empire 2 Total War and so many others out there that really make Empire Total War great. And I'd love to see monuments. You can obviously see with Constantinople that in many of the campaign maps they've introduced monuments as well. And I remember that when I was playing Empire Total War, I was playing a similar battle. This was the first time. It was like a multiplayer battle. I was playing as the French, and this guy who was like, at the time, I think much older than me, but he basically played it in such a way that I had to fight the Native Americans, and it was so hard. But even the naval battles were so fun in Empire. Obviously, as you can see that I'm zooming into it, you have to make sure that you win the naval battles and you master naval battles. Because naval battles, I think they were great. But I think in Napoleon, that they really improved it on top of it. That's what I think they did better. I think Empire was the great title that introduced the foundations of what could have been even more greater mechanics of Total War. Naval battles, infantry firing at each other, and obviously having this fast, stuff. But as I am saying here, it was a fun battle, but it was very difficult because the French, I thought I was going to lose. But there's a reason the Native Americans can become a powerful nation and they can rival European factions, but they never got European style uniforms. And the way they represented it was something I never really understood. Now, of course, this mod definitely has more factions, and I hear the argument that most mods are unbalanced, but look, Empire Total War was also an unbalanced game. Empire Total War has units that pretty much sometimes don't even balance each other that well. And as France, I really never understood why you always had like one region. So if France is Paris, right? The Dutch just have Amsterdam and that's it. Britain has, let's say, London, but not that many cities. Austria does have a couple of cities. The Prussians do also have maybe one or two cities, but it's just Berlin. And that's something I never understood. I always did feel that the German city-states were always well represented. I always did feel that we had something of that kind. And the Ottomans, I think they need more of a revamp. You can obviously see here that in the mod, they do have a revamp indeed. They have a much better roster in this mod. But during the early stages, they don't really have much of a fantastic roster. They are fighting a lot of factions. And the Ottomans do have a lot of corruption issues. But playing as the Swedes in this mod is absolutely great. Except you have your great northern neighbors that will definitely try and ambush you and try to take, St. Petersburg. So there are many issues to face as you're fighting in Empire Total War. And if there was one thing in Empire Total War that I wanted way more monuments. I wanted more historical battle maps. I wanted battle maps that represented the actual historical monuments of cities. I wanted battle maps that showcased the vitality of maybe, London or Paris. I wanted to see more. And there weren't that many events that sort of simulated Empire Total War campaign. It was mostly a sandbox campaign that you were playing most of the time. It was mostly not a lot of scripted events that I would have preferred to have had. And for such a big campaign, let's say starting from 1700 all the way to 1799, there is options to sort of script the campaign. There are ways to bring in family tree. There are ways to bring in more modes of government that I felt were never really introduced or added. And I think they should have done that. And say for example the fight for Spanish Netherlands. I do think that they should have at least allowed Spanish armies to be fighting on your behalf, to have scripted events. I want diplomacy to be much better in Empire 2 in the actual sequel. Yes, presenting regions, presenting state gifts, presenting technologies. I think they can do an absolutely fantastic job. I do think that that is something that we need more of. And as the Dutch, you can see here that the Dutch obviously have their own unique campaign. They do have the Dutch East Indies that they are trying to expand into, but I didn't feel that they didn't have enough objectives because they got the Spanish, they got the German colonies, they also have the British, and they also have the French. Now, while the campaign does advocate to go and expand into the Caribbean, I do think that we needed way more Southeast Asia. I think that this area of the campaign map, plus also Japan and Korea, was a missed opportunity. And yes, they did include Sri Lanka. But I really want to see more and more stuff here. Let's talk about the things that I think Empire did right. Empire did allow you to have diplomacy with a ton of factions. And it always made it interesting to either trade regions for certain technologies, or the factions were always against you. The other thing that I think Empire did really well was province management. You had towns, you had local towns emerging, you could garrison troops XYZ, you could have more options to replenish your units, but you always did have the AI that could give a really good challenge. And of course, I think the British AI in this game is such that if you play as the French or the Spanish, they will always go for your colonies no matter what. And I did want to see more wars between more major factions. Now in this mod you can definitely do that. You definitely see some ahistorical scenarios, but this is a massive sandbox campaign. This is a massive sandbox campaign that really does well. But the mod you can see obviously has historical monuments within the cities, and I really wanted that to be reflected in the actual sequel, right? Because if the actual sequel comes, you're going to have to rename it as Empire Total War 3. But here's the other thing that Empire Total War did do. You could fight these battles, and you could fight these heroic battles that you were fighting. You know, the battles were never easy. If you play in multiplayer, the multiplayer battles were so fun. Honestly, when you play multiplayer, it was always strategy, strategy, and strategy. The battle maps were designed in such a way that terrain played a factor as you fought all these battles, as you were fighting for your sheer life, because the early 1700s start is not easy. Obviously, I am not playing with Man of War, but in many of the factions you could choose a huge amount of navies. You could definitely go and fight naval battles as you see fit. Now in this naval battle, for example, I made the mistake of not trying to master the naval battle mechanics too early, because I always preferred to play ships individually. In fact, if you took the naval mechanics out of this game, okay, and put it as a, I don't know, a war of sail or something, and then you play these ships as you play them as anything else, I think you would do an absolutely fantastic job. Because look, the naval ships are designed in such a way that you could technically fight on a one-on-one scale. I think they've done an absolutely great foundation. They had that foundation there. So I really want Empire 2 Total War, the official sequel, to do something about it. And the one thing neat about this mod is, look at some of the units. Some of them do resemble the 1690s. Some of them do resemble the Musketeers, the King's Musketeers. And this is. So at the end of this video, I want to know what your opinion is, and let's have that talk.